In a family where everything seems perfect, until the day you discover the husband may have a secret life, a hidden family, and a son you never knew existed. In the quiet village of Ndebe, where the sun always shines and life seems so peaceful, one piece of paper is about to turn a loving wife into a woman consumed by suspicion and fear. Oluchi's world shatters when she finds a note in her husband's clothes, a note that hints at betrayal, at lies that go deeper than she could ever have imagined. What would you do if the man you trusted most might be living a lie? As Oluchi digs deeper, she uncovers secrets that could destroy not just her marriage, but the very fabric of her family. In a place where honor and reputation mean everything, one woman's quest for the truth will uncover the darkest twist of all. The past Easy tried to bury is about to come back with a vengeance. And the cost of keeping these secrets? It could be more than anyone is willing to pay. This is not just a story about love and betrayal. It's a story where trust is shattered, and the truth is more terrifying than the lies. Stay with us as we dive into the shadows of Ndebe, where no one is safe from the darkness hidden within. Subscribe to Savanna's Storytime for more captivating stories that will leave you wanting more. The village of Ndebe lay cradled within the embrace of lush green hills, where the earth met the sky in a gentle curve. Narrow dirt paths wound their way through the village, leading to clusters of traditional thatched roof homes. The air was thick with the scent of freshly tilled soil and the sounds of daily life. Women pounding yam in wooden mortars, men returning from the fields, and the laughter of children echoing through the narrow streets. At the heart of Ndebe was the market square, a vibrant hub of activity where traders gathered to sell their goods. Baskets overflowed with yams, cassava, and plantains, their earthy scents mingling with the sweet aroma of ripe mangoes and freshly roasted ground nuts. Stalls adorned with vibrant fabrics fluttered in the breeze, a kaleidoscope of colors that reflected the lively spirit of the village. In this village lived Ezi, a man whose presence commanded respect. Tall and broad-shouldered, his skin bore the deep, rich tone of one who had spent his life working under the sun. His eyes, dark and intense, held a quiet wisdom that the villagers had come to rely on. Ez was known for his generosity, often lending a hand or offering advice to those in need. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority. Ezi was proud of his three daughters, Amara, Nkechi, and Ifunanya, each one a joy to him and his wife, Oluchi. Yet, in the quiet moments, when he was alone with his thoughts, Ezi felt a pang of longing for a son, a boy who would carry on his name and legacy. It was a desire he kept to himself, never allowing it to overshadow the love he had for his daughters. Oluchi, his wife, was the heart of their family. Her beauty was the talk of Ndebe, smooth brown skin that seemed to glow in the sunlight, and expressive eyes that could convey both warmth and sternness in equal measure. Oluchi moved with a grace that belied the strength within her, a strength that had seen her family through both joy and hardship. She was devoted to her husband and children, and her life centered around their happiness. One fateful afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light through the open windows of Oluchi's home. The sounds of her daughter's laughter drifted in from outside, mingling with the rustling of leaves as a gentle breeze swept through the village. Inside, the house was a picture of simplicity and order. The living room floor was adorned with colorful mats, each one carefully woven with intricate patterns that told stories of heritage and tradition. Oluchi moved quietly through the house, her hands busy as she tidied up, her mind content with the rhythm of her daily routine. As she was arranging Easy's clothes, a folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Her curiosity piqued, and she bent down to pick it up. The paper was old, its edges worn and slightly yellowed with time. She hesitated momentarily, her fingers tracing the fold before carefully opening it. The words on the page were few but heavy with implication. I've delivered the money to him and his mother. Oluchi's heart skipped a beat, the simple act of reading those words sending a ripple of unease through her. She read the line again, her mind struggling to grasp its meaning. Who was him? And why was Ezzy sending money to another woman? The questions swirled in her head, each one more unsettling than the last. Shock quickly gave way to suspicion as Oluchi stood there, the letter clutched in her hand. Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations, past actions, and Ezzy's occasional absences. Could this be evidence of something more sinister? A secret Ezzy had kept from her all these years? Doubt crept into her heart, planting the first seeds of mistrust. She reread the letter, hoping that a closer inspection might reveal some misunderstanding, but the words remained the same, cold and unyielding. The playful sounds of her daughters outside now felt distant, almost muted, as Oluchi stood rooted to the spot, the once warm glow of the afternoon sun now casting long, uncertain shadows around her. That night, a quiet tension filled the house, pressing down like a weight on Oluchi's chest. The usual warmth that marked their home felt distant, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to seep into every corner. Eze, oblivious to the storm brewing within his wife, was lost in conversation with their eldest daughter, Amara, about her schooling. His voice, normally so comforting, now grated on Oluchi's ears, each word a reminder of the secret she held in her heart. Oluchi sat nearby, her hands mechanically going through the motions of evening chores, but her mind was miles away. The letter, its words seared into her memory, played over and over in her head like a song she couldn't stop humming. I've delivered the money to him and his mother. What did it mean? Does he have a male son somewhere? Why was he sending money to another woman? The questions gnawed at her, feeding the dark tendrils of suspicion that coiled around her thoughts. Later, as the house settled into the stillness of the night, Oluchi couldn't sleep. She sat in the room, her eyes fixed on the moonlight outside the window. The darkness in the room was nothing compared to the shadows in her mind, where doubts and fears danced with cruel delight. She turned her head slightly, glancing at Easy's sleeping form. His face, peaceful and untroubled, was a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within her. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt. How could she suspect this man, her husband, the father of her children? But then the letter's words resurfaced, twisting the knife of doubt deeper into her heart. Did she truly know the man she married, or had he been hiding something from her all along? Her thoughts spiraled, moving from suspicion to anger, then back to fear. What if the worst was true? What would it mean for their family, for their three daughters who adored their father? The very idea of confronting him filled her with dread, not only for the confrontation itself, but for the possible destruction it could bring to the life they had built together. Yet the alternative, remaining silent, living with the gnawing uncertainty, felt equally unbearable. Oluchi lay there, trapped between two impossible choices. The quiet of the night did nothing to soothe her. Instead, it magnified her inner turmoil, each tick of the clock echoing like a drumbeat in her ears. As the hours stretched on, the tension in her chest grew tighter, the fear of betrayal mingling with the deep love she still felt for Ease. But tonight, she would not speak. She would not wake him to ask the questions burning on her tongue. Instead, she let the silence stretch on, wrapping herself in it like a shield, even as it threatened to suffocate her. For now, she would keep the storm within her contained, but the cracks were already forming, and it was only a matter of time before they would shatter the fragile peace of their home. The morning sun rose gently over the village of Ndebe, casting a warm glow on the waking world. The familiar sounds of roosters crowing echoed through the air, mingling with the soft chatter of women heading to the stream, their clay pots balanced gracefully on their heads. Life in the village was beginning its daily rhythm, but within Oluchi's home, a different kind of tension simmered. In the kitchen, Oluchi moved with practiced ease, preparing breakfast for her family. The aroma of freshly fried akara filled the small room, yet her mind was far from the tasks at hand. Easy entered the kitchen, his presence filling the room with his usual calm. He greeted Oluchi with a smile, his voice warm as he asked about the day's plans. Oluchi forced a smile in return, though her heart pounded with an anxious beat. As she handed him a plate of food, she spoke, her tone measured and light. I need to visit the neighboring town today, she said, her eyes avoiding his. There are some special herbs I need to buy. Izzy didn't question her. He nodded, taking a seat at the small wooden table. Safe travels, my wife, he replied, his voice sincere. He had no reason to doubt her. Oluchi's trips to the neighboring town were not uncommon, especially when she sought out the rare ingredients she used in her cooking. But this time, Oluchi's journey was not for herbs. As she finished her morning chores and prepared to leave, a sense of determination settled over her. She decided to trace the address on the back of the letter, a resolve to uncover the truth. Yet beneath that resolve lay a deep unease, a fear of what she might discover. As she stepped out of her home and onto the dirt path that led out of the village, Oluchi felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The road ahead was uncertain, and the truth she sought might bring more pain than peace. But Oluchi knew she couldn't turn back. Whatever lay at the end of this journey, she would face it head on, for the sake of her family and for her own peace of mind. Oluchi stepped into the neighboring town, her heart heavy with suspicion and unease. The town was larger and more modern than Ndebe, with concrete houses lining the streets and a bustling market filled with the sounds of traders calling out their wares. Women in brightly colored wrappers moved between stalls, bartering for fresh produce, while men gathered in groups, discussing the day's news. The scent of spices and roasted meat filled the air, mingling with the distant hum of motorcycles and the chatter of the market. As Oluchi walked through the crowded streets, she kept her head low, asking discreet questions to anyone who seemed approachable. Her inquiries were vague. She spoke of a woman named Adaobi, who had recently come to her attention. Most people shrugged or shook their heads, but eventually, an elderly woman pointed her in the right direction. After what felt like an eternity of wandering, Oluchi found herself standing in front of a modest home on the outskirts of town. The house was small, with walls that bore the wear of time, but it was tidy, with a neat garden in front where bright flowers bloomed. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Oluchi approached the door and knocked. The door creaked open, and there stood Adaobi, a woman in her late 30s. Her face, though kind, carried the weariness of someone who had faced more than her share of life's challenges. She was modestly dressed in a simple wrapper and blouse, her hair neatly tied back. Her eyes, though tired, held a warmth that invited trust. Good afternoon, Oluchi began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been traveling and I'm in need of a place to rest for a while. Adaobi's brow furrowed for a moment, but then she smiled gently and nodded. Of course. Please come in and make yourself comfortable. Oluchi stepped into the small but cozy living room, where simple wooden furniture was arranged neatly. The walls were adorned with framed photographs and a few hand-woven mats. Adaobi offered her a seat and disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a cup of water. Oluchi accepted it gratefully, though her mind was elsewhere. As they sat together, Oluchi decided to start the conversation with something familiar and safe. I'm from Ndebe, she began, her voice carrying a hint of warmth. My husband and I have been married for several years. We have three beautiful daughters, Amara, Nkechi, and Ifunanya. They are the joy of our lives. Adaobi listened intently, her expression softening as Oluchi spoke of her family. It sounds like you have a lovely family, Adaobi replied. Children are truly a blessing. Encouraged by Adaobi's response, Oluchi continued, Yes, they are. My husband works hard to provide for us, and I try to do my best to keep our home peaceful and happy. But, as with all families, we have our challenges. Adaobi nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. It's the same for me, she said, her voice steady but tinged with melancholy. My husband passed away several years ago, leaving me to raise our son Ikenna on my own. It hasn't been easy, but we manage. Thankfully, Ikenna is receiving a free education, thanks to a kind benefactor, and I've been able to work as a teacher at his school. We've been blessed in unexpected ways. Oluchi's heart tightened as she listened, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. She felt a deep pity for Adaobi, a woman who had struggled so much and yet spoke with such quiet dignity. But alongside that pity grew a burning anger. The pieces were falling into place, and with each word Adaobi spoke, Oluchi became more convinced of what she had feared. Eze, her husband, must have faked his own death to continue supporting Adaobi and Ikenna in secret. He had hidden this part of his life from her, and now she understood why. Oluchi forced herself to smile and thank Adaobi for her hospitality, but inside, her heart was a storm of betrayal and rage. She exchanged a few more pleasantries with Adaobi, but her mind was consumed by the dark thoughts forming inside her. As Oluchi made her way back home that evening, the sun setting in the distance, she was no longer the same woman who had entered the town that morning. The seeds of doubt had taken root, and with each step, they grew, twisting her love for ease into something unrecognizable. Back in the village of Ndebe, a palpable tension begins to weave its way through Ease and Oluchi's once harmonious home. Oluchi, who once moved with warmth and grace, now carries herself with a cold distance, her demeanor towards Easy shifting like the changing winds. Where once she welcomed him with open arms and a gentle smile, now she avoids his touch, her eyes that once sparkled with affection, now veiled with suspicion. The air between them thickens with the weight of unspoken words and growing resentment. As days turn into weeks, Oluchi's visits to Adaobi's home become more frequent. What began as an innocent friendship now harbors a darker purpose. Each visit is laced with a silent mission to uncover more evidence of Easy's betrayal. Oluchi's heart, once full of love, now burns with a desire to confirm her suspicions, to unearth the secrets she believes Easy has buried. She masks her true intentions behind a veil of kindness, but inside, her thoughts churn with anger and mistrust. Izzy, too, begins to notice the shift. Oluchi's frequent absences, her distant demeanor, and the coldness in her eyes ignite a spark of suspicion in his heart. He wonders where she goes so often, and with whom. His thoughts, once clear and focused on his work and family, now spiral into wild imaginings. The bitter seed of doubt takes root in his mind, growing into a twisted belief that Oluchi might be seeking comfort in the arms of another man, a man who might give her the son he has longed for, but she has not borne. The home they once shared as a sanctuary of love and warmth is now a battleground of silent accusations and hidden resentments. Ezi feels betrayed by Oluchi's secrecy, her unexplained absences gnawing at his peace of mind. He watches her closely, his heart heavy with the weight of imagined infidelity. In the silence of their home, the rift between them widens, each trapped in their own world of suspicion and mistrust, unable to bridge the gap that has grown between them. The village of Ndebe buzzes with its usual morning activity, but in Eze and Oluchi's home, there's an air of anticipation. The house is spotless, every corner meticulously cleaned, and the scent of freshly cooked food drifts through the rooms, inviting and warm. Oluchi has spent the day preparing for her guests. Her movements precise, her demeanor calm, but with an undercurrent of tension that she hides well. Easy, unaware of the true nature of the visit, prepares himself to welcome Oluchi's guests out of respect and curiosity. The daughters, Amara, Nkechi, and Ifunanya, are excited about the visitors, their chatter filling the house with a lively energy. When Adaobi arrives, she holds her son Ikena's hand, the boy's wide eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with curiosity. Oluchi greets them warmly at the door, her smile genuine but laced with a quiet intensity. She introduces Adaobi and Ikena to her daughters, the children quickly warming to each other as they exchange shy smiles and greetings. The atmosphere is initially light, the women exchanging pleasantries, and the children's laughter providing a cheerful backdrop. But as they step further into the house, Adaobi's gaze lifts and lands on Ize. Her steps falter, and she stops in her tracks, her eyes widening in shock. Ize! Adaobi's voice is barely a whisper, her disbelief clear in the way her hand tightens around Ikena's. Easy, who had been expecting just another routine visit, feels the blood drain from his face. He stands frozen, his mind racing as he stares at the woman before him. The warmth of the gathering evaporates in an instant, leaving a thick, oppressive silence in its place. Oluchi watches the exchange, her eyes narrowing as the pieces of the puzzle she's been struggling to assemble fall into place. The air in the room grows heavy as Oluchi steps forward, her expression hardening, the warmth she had shown earlier completely gone. Her voice trembles with a mixture of fury and hurt, each word she speaks carrying the weight of the betrayal she feels. You faked your death, Ease, Oluchi begins, her tone sharp and accusing. You did all this to escape your responsibilities and secretly send money to Adaobi and her son, your son, through someone else. Ease opens his mouth to respond, but the words stick in his throat. His mind is still reeling from the shock of seeing Adaobi, and now he's faced with Oluchi's accusations. Accusations that he knows have been festering in her heart for some time. Adaobi, sensing the storm that was about to break, gently placed a hand on her son Ikena's shoulder. Ikena, go outside and play with the girls for a while, she instructed. The boy obeyed, slipping quietly out of the room. As the door closed behind Ikena, Oluchi's anger only seemed to grow. The thought of Easy's betrayal gnawed at her, twisting her emotions into a tight knot of resentment and hurt. Without a word, she turned on her heel and stormed into the kitchen. The sound of clattering wood echoed through the house as she rummaged through the utensils, finally emerging with two sticks in her hands, one for herself and one intended for Adaobi. Adaobi's eyes widened in alarm as she saw the wooden sticks, but she remained composed, her voice steady and urgent. No, Oluchi, you don't understand. Izzy didn't fake his death, she begins, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carries the force of a revelation. Ikena is not his son. He's the son of Izzy's late brother, Obina. Her words hang in the air, heavy and disorienting, as Oluchi, still clutching the sticks she had fetched in anger, stares at Adaobi in stunned disbelief. The rage that had fueled her moments before seems to waver, replaced by a creeping confusion. What are you saying? Oluchi's voice quivers, the fierce certainty she had felt only moments ago now slipping away. Adaobi's eyes glisten with unshed tears as she continues, her tone filled with a sorrow that has long been buried. Izzy and I were lovers once, she admits, the words spilling out as though they had been held back for too long. But it was Obina I slept with, and it was him who got me pregnant. When Obina died, Izzy felt betrayed, and he left the village. I tried looking for him. I searched everywhere, but I never found him. The room, now charged with a potent mix of shock, sorrow, and deep regret, seems to close in around them. Oluchi's fingers loosen their grip on the sticks as the fury that had once driven her begins to dissolve, replaced by a painful understanding. The truth, stark and undeniable, washes over her. Easy's actions, though flawed and hurtful, had been rooted not in deceit or betrayal, but in his own turmoil and heartache. At that moment, she realizes that Ez's silence, his distance, had been a shield, a way to protect himself from the pain of the past, even as it hurt those he loved. For a long moment, Eze remained silent, his face drawn with the burden of years of regret. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper, yet filled with the depth of his remorse. I couldn't face what had happened, Oluchi. I felt betrayed by both Adaobi and my brother, but I couldn't let them suffer. I arranged for the money to be sent to them, and I've been supporting Ikena's education all these years. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was only creating more pain. The truth hit Oluchi like a wave, the force of it leaving her breathless. She felt as though the ground beneath her had shifted, leaving her unsteady, grasping for something solid in the midst of the emotional storm. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her life, had kept this secret from her, and the betrayal stung deeply. Yet before she could find the words to respond, Adaobi's soft voice cut through the haze of her thoughts. Easy, Adaobi said gently, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. So you have been my benefactor all these years? Oluchi's eyes widened, the realization dawning on her like the first light of dawn after a long dark night. The room, heavy with the weight of unspoken words, begins to feel lighter as the truth emerges, stripping away the layers of misunderstanding that have clouded their lives. Easy's voice trembles, his tone filled with regret and sorrow. I held on to this grudge for so long, it blinded me, he begins, his eyes downcast. I'm sorry, Oluchi. I'm sorry, Adaobi. I should have been honest from the start. Adaobi, her eyes glistening with tears, nods slowly. The pain of the past lingers in her gaze, but there's also a softness, a readiness to let go. I'm sorry too easy, she says quietly. I never wanted things to end. It did back then. As her words hang in the air, the tension that had filled the room begins to dissipate. There's a palpable shift, a recognition among them that while the wounds may not heal overnight, the first step toward forgiveness has been taken. Oluchi, still wrestling with a tangle of emotions, relief, confusion, and a touch of lingering anger, suddenly feels the need to break the heavy atmosphere. The tension, though softened by the recent apologies, still lingers in the room like a stubborn shadow. With a quick glance at the turning stick she still holds, a mischievous glint sparks in her eyes. Well, if we're not beating ease today, she says with a wry smile, her voice laced with a hint of playful sarcasm, then I suppose these sticks can go back to the kitchen. Adaobi, caught off guard by Oluchi's sudden shift in tone, lets out a small, relieved laugh. The sound, light and genuine, echoes in the room, cutting through the remnants of tension. Ezi, who had been bracing himself for further confrontation, finds himself chuckling despite the lingering heaviness in his heart. The shared laughter, though brief, feels like a release, a way to acknowledge the absurdity of the situation while also embracing the first steps toward reconciliation. Later that evening, the house in Ndebe was cloaked in a serene quiet. Ezi and Oluchi sat side by side, the weight of the day's revelations heavy between them. The usual sounds of their bustling home were replaced by a silence that demanded acknowledgement. Ezi, feeling both vulnerable and determined, reached for Oluchi's hand. His voice was soft but earnest. I know it will take time, but I want us to move forward, together. Oluchi met his gaze, her eyes reflecting a mix of hurt and hope. She nodded slowly, her voice steady. We will, Ez, but no more secrets. The room settled into a cautious peace. They both knew the road ahead would be challenging, but there was a shared commitment to face it together, their resolve quietly strengthening in the stillness. With the star watching them from above, Ezzy and Oluchi were ready to face the future together, their love, though tested, standing strong.